Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, Louis in Augusta, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind adjust the theme, crossing new frontiers to conquer today's challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, Louis in Augusta.
11 years after my experimental discovery of how to solve a grand challenge problem and how to solve it across a new internet that is also a new supercomputer and a new computer, that invention of parallel processing was reconfirmed by then President Bill Clinton, who acknowledged my invention in his speech of August 26, 2000. That speech of President Bill Clinton was delivered to the Nigerian parliament. I discovered 635 how to reduce 180 years of time to solution to 1 day and do so on a processor. And how to reduce that time to solution to just 1 day of time to solution across a new internet that is across a new supercomputer that is a new internet and that is defined as a new global network of 65,536 processors. I visualize my 16 times 2 to the power 16 email wires as pieces of firewood that connected my 2 to the power 16 processors that each contained kerosene. My scientific quest was to experimentally discover the new knowledge or the intellectual spark that will set my new internet on fire. As the lone wolf massively parallel processing supercomputer scientist of the 1980s, it was imperative that I know how my ensemble of 64 binary thousand processors were married together by my ensemble of 1 binary million email wires and married together as one seamless, cohesive supercomputer that is not a computer per se, but that is a new internet de facto. And that I know that new global network both forward and backward. That new knowledge was not known to any of the 25,000 vector processing supercomputer scientists of the 1980s. That new knowledge was the reason I could set my new supercomputer on fire. For me, Philip Emeagwali, 1989 was the year of fire. The year the massively parallel processing supercomputer became the fire the supercomputer scientists can't put out. The 65,536 simultaneously sent and synchronously received email messages were like bullets out of my eyes. Searching for the parallel processed solution to the toughest problem in calculus was like searching for a black goat at night. My journey to the farthest frontier of technological knowledge and my quest for the fastest supercomputer that is a new internet was a mathematical journey from fiction to fact to forecast. A theory is an idea that's not positively true. Prior to my experimental discovery of the 4th of July 1989, the mechanism by which 64 binary thousand computational physics codes were synchronously emailed to as many processors remained unknown and remained a theory that was not positively true. My experimental discovery of the 4th of July 1989 put to rest the saying that parallel processing is a beautiful theory that lacked experimental confirmation. Prior to my 1989 experimental discovery, parallel processing was widely caricatured and rejected as a huge waste of everybody's time. But in the 1970s, back in the 1970s and 80s, parallel processing was ridiculed as a beautiful theory that lacks experimental confirmation. And my quest for the fastest massively parallel processed computation that could be executed across 2 raised to power 16 processors was like searching for a black box in a dark 16-dimensional universe. Looking back from June 20, 1974 in Corvallis, Oregon, United States, my lone search for how parallel processing makes computers faster and for how an ensemble of 64 binary thousand processors makes supercomputers fastest was like going into the Sambisa forest of northern Nigeria alone and going there to search for the elusive Chibok girls that were held hostage by Boko Haram fighters. Parallel processing was the Holy Grail and the Chibok girls of supercomputing. Searching for the fastest parallel processing supercomputer was like walking at night and along an uncharted road in the Sambisa forest of northern Nigeria, and doing so armed against Boko Haram fighters with only a small lantern. My quest was for new knowledge, new algebra, new calculus, and new computational physics. My quest was also for a new computer science that could only arise from a new supercomputer that is not a computer per se, but that is a new internet de facto. My contribution to the development of the computer is this. I experimentally discovered that the impossible to compute is in fact possible to compute. On June 20, 1974, and at age 19, I was like a mouse crawling inside the supercomputer that was at 1800 Southwest Campus Way, Corvallis, Oregon, United States. Over the next decade and a half, I grew into the 34-year-old lion that was protecting the world's fastest supercomputer that I discovered to be a new internet that is a new global network of 65,536 tightly coupled processors. Who is the father of the internet? The internet has many fathers and mothers, as well as many uncles and aunts. However, I Philip Emeagwali is the only father of the internet that invented a new internet. I visualized my fastest calculations across my new internet before I experimentally discovered the fastest calculations across my new global network of 64 binary thousand commodity processors, or across as many tiny identical computers. I visualized my new internet in a fictional 16-dimensional universe, but I experimentally discovered my new supercomputer in our factual 3-dimensional universe. Fast computation defines the computer. Recording a never-before recorded speed in computation redefines the supercomputer and redefines the boundary of human knowledge. The fastest computation is the most objective and the most measurable contribution to the development of the computer. The supercomputer speed up of from 1 day to 180 years that I experimentally discovered on the 4th of July of 1989 and in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States, made the news headlines because it was a quantum increase in parallel processing supercomputer speed instead of an incremental increase in sequential processing supercomputer speed. That invention of the parallel processing supercomputer was also a paradigm shift in thinking instead of an evolutionary shift in thinking. That invention of the precursor to the modern supercomputer opened our eyes to the richness of consequences arising from parallel processing across millions upon millions of tightly coupled commodity off-the-shelf processors that shared nothing with each other. That invention allowed us to see the modern computer in a different way, namely as parallel processing across processors. As reported in the news media, such as the June 20, 1990 issue of the Wall Street Journal, my invention of the massively parallel processing supercomputer was not in the new fastest supercomputer. My invention was in discovering a new way of thinking about the new fastest supercomputer and thinking about the supercomputer of tomorrow, not as a computer per se, but as a new global network of tightly coupled processors that shared nothing with each other, and that is a new internet de facto. My experimental discovery of massively parallel processing was processor agnostic or independent of processor technology and was a blueprint for a never-before-seen internet. The invention of a faster supercomputing is a historical milestone that measures human progress. The reason the invention of how to compute faster and how to do so by changing the way we look at the modern supercomputer is a marker of progress is that it's an invention that makes the impossible to compute possible to compute. The invention of the massively parallel processing supercomputer proves that humanity is progressing in the right direction. I'm Philip Emeagwali at emeagwali.com. Thank you.
insightful and brilliant
Thank you
lecture.
very much.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.